So if you want to improve your pronunciation and your accent, but you feel like you've hit a wall and you're not making progress, here's something that I believe can help unblock your progress. It can help start putting cracks in that wall so that you can break it down and reduce the friction in your communication. Finally, start making some progress again in your pronunciation and in your accent. And that is, at least I call it, contrastive input. Now, this is a term that's around, so I might be using this differently than it's conventionally used. I'm not actually sure. I need to research it more, but I'm going to explain to you how I think about what I call contrastive input. Take it for what is worth. If you follow my logic, hopefully it'll be useful to you. So imagine that as a baby, you're being bombarded by so much information, so much detail, and your new baby brain doesn't really know how to make sense of it yet because it's so much. So your brain has to make a decision. What information do you pay attention to, and what information do you ignore? This is an upgrade for your brain in your native language, but it's a problem when you go to a new language or a new accent because your brain has these pre-existing categories of sounds that are helpful to you in your native language. They allow you to spend less energy and immediately know these are the sounds that matter and these are the differences in sounds that don't matter. You have a pattern of what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to in your native language. So in Portuguese, for example, the difference between dente and dente, or quente and quente, is just a difference in accent. It's not a difference in pronunciation. It doesn't change the meaning of the words. It just gives you some optional information about where the speaker is from. So your brain doesn't have to put as much value on that difference in sounds in Portuguese. But as soon as you go to English, suddenly we have chu versus tu. Now, this is no longer a difference in accent telling you where someone's from. This is an essential, it's no longer an optional difference in sound. It's an essential difference in sound to be able to tell words apart because chew means to chew food, and to means, it can be the number two, it can be to like also, it can be to like going to something. The point is, it's now a difference in sound that your brain has to pay a lot more attention to in a new environment, in a new language. And there's tons of examples of this. The point is, there are all of these contrasts. There are these distinctions, these differences in sounds that in your native language, they're collapsed. Your brain doesn't see a difference because it doesn't care. It doesn't need to see a difference. It doesn't get rewarded for seeing that difference. But when you go to a new language, a new accent, you have to work to start creating a separation there. It's like putting a crack in a wall, right? Putting a separation in that wall so that you can start to create a distinction in your brain because your brain literally can't hear the difference at the beginning between, bad versus bed. Bad like huing or mao and bed like cama. Your brain can't really hear the difference for most Brazilians when you first start. That distinction is collapsed. Bad, bed, it all sounds the same. So you have to work to take that distinction and put a crack in it through what I call contrastive input, which means training your brain to hear a bunch of examples of bad and a bunch of examples of bed and starting to hear where the boundary is, where the distinction is, which one is which. Because when you first start, you're not able to tell the difference any better than chance. You're basically guessing. You hear bad, 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 and you're like, that one, or that one. You don't really know. And you're just using the surrounding context of the sentence or other clues to help you. But just from the sounds alone, you can't tell the difference. But natives can easily tell the difference. So that's the thing, is how do you train your brain to get closer to the perceptual expertise of what natives have? And I believe, again, the secret is contrastive input. It's creating that crack, that distinction in your perception so that you can more and more obviously, easily, and consistently tell the difference. So how might you do that? Well, here's the way that I see it. In everyday spoken English, these sounds, bed versus bad, that vowel, that distinction, you encounter it in a very sort of random, unorganized way. Just, distributed normally in English, however it is. So it's mixed together with all the other sounds kind of randomly throughout all the sentences that you hear native speakers saying. And your brain doesn't really have a chance to compare those sounds side by side, because by the time you hear one sound and by the time you hear the next example of the other sound, you heard 20 different sounds in the middle and your brain already forgot. And it's just too much information to make sense of. Maybe your brain will figure it out, but maybe it won't, because there's so much competing information and your brain already has that pre-existing habit from your native language that's interfering with learning this new distinction. So contrastive input, the way I see it working is, let's get rid of all of the noise. Let's get rid of all of the distraction. Let's curate our input so that we're focusing purely on that contrast. So what that looks like is taking just bad and just bed and listening to those side by side, listening to them from possibly many different native speakers in different situations with different intonation, maybe even expanding the focus a little bit. So you're not just listening to and by themselves, but you listen to, the full word, bed, bad, or other words like said, sad, or we start expanding it further and you hear larger chunks, part of a phrase or even full phrases, whatever it is. You start training your brain to hear lots of examples specifically focused on that contrast. So instead of just random generalized input from natives, where you just happen to sometimes stumble upon those sounds, it's a way of not avoiding that challenge, but we're going to focus, we're going to train on it. Just, like if you want to improve your guitar or violin playing skills or any skill, basically, you want to take the part that you struggle with and focus on it, train on that. So that's the idea here. The way that I think of and the way that I apply contrastive input is take whatever contrast you're struggling with, maybe that's versus and then focus on that. Modify your input, curate it so that you're training directly in a focused way across that contrast so that you can train your brain to start to notice the difference. A term you might look up is it's HVPT. I think it's called high variability pronunciation phonetic training, something like that, which is a similar idea to this. Anyways, I hope this is helpful. Try it out. It helps me. It's one of the best ways I know of for breaking through that wall when you've gotten stuck and starting to see progress again. Let me know what you think. Try it out if you want, and let me know if you want support actually applying this in improving your pronunciation and accent, because I do work with people one-on-one. So reach out to me if you're interested in that. Anyways, hope this helped. Let me know what you think.